Think about products that promised something totally new, something groundbreaking, and then just vanished. Crystal Pepsi, that clear cola from the early 90s, it definitely fits that bill. Today, we're taking a deep dive for you into the story behind this, see-through soda.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example. You've got a major company, PepsiCo, trying to innovate in like a super established market. They saw an opportunity with this whole clear trend and went all in on a product that looked really radical for its category.
Exactly. And for you listening, our goal today is basically to understand why Crystal Pepsi, despite all the initial hype and this massive marketing push, ultimately became more of a trivia answer than something you'd actually find on the supermarket shelf.
Hmm.
We've got some detailed information here that really breaks down its journey from those ambitious beginnings to its pretty rapid end, actually.
And by looking at what happened with Crystal Pepsi, we can pull out some really valuable insights,
Hmm.
about what drives consumers, how markets evolve, and fundamentally what's essential for a new product to actually succeed.
Okay, let's get into it then. The early 1990s seemed to have this real thing for clear products. It wasn't just drinks, right? We saw clear soaps, clear shampoos, even clear versions of alcoholic beverages. What was that all about? Why transparency suddenly?
Well, what's fascinating there is the consumer psychology at play. Clear often signaled purity, a sense of being more natural, maybe even healthier. It implied a lack of artificial stuff like colors.
Ah, okay.
It was a really powerful visual cue tapping into this growing consumer interest in wellness, or at least like the perception of it.
Right, the idea of health. So PepsiCo looked at this trend and thought, okay, cola needs a clear makeover.
Mm.
Their angle was that Crystal Pepsi was caffeine-free and clean. That was a pretty big shift from the traditional dark, kind of mysterious image of cola, wasn't it? They even had that slogan, "You've never seen a taste like this."
Yeah.
Pretty confident stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It was a bold strategy, and it definitely got a lot of attention right off the bat. That Super Bowl commercial, the big promotional campaigns, they created a significant buzz. People were curious.
Yeah.
Here was this iconic brand offering something completely unexpected, visually at least.
And that initial curiosity, it definitely translated into sales, didn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, millions of cases shipped, early reports showed strong demand. It really looked like they might have hit on something big.
It did for a moment.
But then the excitement it fizzled out pretty quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. The novelty wore off relatively fast once people actually, tried the product. What many found was a flavor that was similar-ish to regular Pepsi, but with this kind of subtle citrusy note.
Mm.
And that just didn't quite line up with their established expectations of what a cola should taste like. It was confusing.
Right. People have these really, ingrained ideas
Yeah.
about cola flavor. It's more than just taste. It's a whole sensory thing. And this clear version, while it looked different, didn't deliver that familiar, satisfying punch.
Yeah.
Plus, there was that whole caffeine issue.
Oh, that's a critical point, yeah.
Yeah.
For so many regular soda drinkers, the caffeine isn't just like a bonus. It's a key reason they drink it, the function.
Right, the pick-me-up.
Exactly. So removing it probably alienated a big chunk of their core customer base right there. So you ended up with a product that didn't fully satisfy the established cola drinkers and didn't quite resonate strongly enough with a new, maybe health-conscious audience either. It fell between stools, really.
And the feedback from consumers really highlighted this gap, didn't it, between how it looked and how it tasted. People were basically saying, it looks like water, but tastes kind of like Pepsi, but not quite right. Just a weird experience.
Confusing.
And then, to make things even more complicated, Coca-Cola jumps in with Tab Clear.
Right. And if we think about competitive strategy, how companies position themselves against rivals, Coke's launch of Tab Clear, this clear diet cola, was a really, really interesting move.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it seemed less about launching a winning product itself and maybe more about deliberately undermining Crystal Pepsi.
Sabotage.
Kind of. It seemed designed to disrupt the novelty and the unique appeal that Crystal Pepsi was trying so hard to build, basically to confuse the whole clear cola idea.
It was almost like they were saying, oh, you think clear cola is special. Look, here's another one. And it's diet. It probably just muddied the waters for consumers even more.
Right, yeah.
And took away any distinctiveness Crystal Pepsi might have had.
Precisely. And this leads us straight to a really crucial factor in Crystal Pepsi's failure: the role or maybe the limitations of their market research.
Okay.
While PepsiCo obviously did some initial studies, it looks like they might have overemphasized the general clear trend. Like they saw clear was popular and assumed that was enough validation for a clear cola.
So it sounds like maybe they relied more on intuition, the cultural vibe, rather than digging deep into what consumers actually wanted in a cola specifically.
That seems plausible, yeah.
They seem to have missed some basic questions like, did people really want a clear cola that tasted kind of familiar but didn't have any caffeine? Was that actually a need?
And this really brings up a big question about how rigorous their flavor testing was. I mean, in the beverage industry, taste is everything, right?
Absolutely paramount.
The fact that the flavor profile left so many people feeling, well, underwhelmed suggests that maybe this critical aspect wasn't tested as thoroughly as it should have been before they went wide with the launch. They seem to have prioritized the visual novelty, the clear aspect, but maybe underestimated just how important meeting those fundamental flavor expectations really is for cola drinkers.
It's almost like they bet the farm on the visual difference alone being enough to win people over. But at the end of the day, it's still a drink. It needs to taste good, and for many, fulfill that function, the energy boost from caffeine, like you said.
Yeah.
Removing that caffeine was a huge change, and it seems they didn't fully account for how their core audience would react.
Exactly. And the fact that they seemed unprepared for competitive moves like Tab Clear, that also points to potential gaps in their market analysis. They didn't seem to fully anticipate how a giant like Coke might react strategically.
Okay, so summing that part up, the clear trend wasn't a magic bullet for every category. The taste didn't quite hit the mark. They potentially annoyed loyal customers by removing caffeine, and they got blindsided by a competitor. It sounds like a perfect storm, really.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. A perfect storm leading to, well, what happened next?
Which was?
Well, PepsiCo did try to fix it. They reportedly tweaked the formula, hoping to get people interested again, but by that point, the initial disappointment and, frankly, the confusion had already set in.
Too little, too late.
Seems like it. By 1994, Crystal Pepsi had pretty much disappeared from shelves in the U.S. market.
Wow, that's a pretty short lifespan for a product that launched with such a bang with its Super Bowl ad and everything.
Very short.
But to give them credit, it does sound like PepsiCo learned some pretty valuable lessons from the whole thing. It wasn't a total waste, maybe.
Oh, absolutely not. The story of Crystal Pepsi apparently became a really significant internal case study for PepsiCo. It hammered home just how critical it is to align your product innovation with what consumers actually want and prefer.
Right.
And the absolute necessity of doing thorough market testing before you dump millions into a major launch. You can have something visually stunning, totally novel, but if it doesn't meet those fundamental consumer needs and expectations, it's going to struggle big time.
It is interesting, though, that Crystal Pepsi had that brief comeback in the 2010s, right?
Yeah.
Driven by nostalgia.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
It shows how even something considered a failure can develop this kind of cult following over time, doesn't it?
Totally. That limited comeback really showed the power of nostalgia in marketing and how social media can suddenly amplify these seemingly forgotten brands. But, those were clearly short-term promotional things.
Right, not a serious attempt to bring it back for good.
No, definitely not trying to reestablish it in the mainstream market.
So when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, what are the really key business lessons that we, and maybe more importantly, you listening, can take away from the whole Crystal Pepsi story?
Well, I think the number one takeaway has to be the crucial importance of rigorous market research. You mentioned a study earlier, right? A 2023 study indicated that a huge majority, like 70% of new products that don't meet consumer expectations, they're discontinued within just 2 years.
70%. Wow.
Yeah. And Crystal Pepsi is just such a stark reminder of how not fully understanding what your consumers want can lead straight to that outcome. You really have to grasp what your target audience wants and expects, not just jump on a broad trend.
Right. Just because clear was trendy in, say, soap, didn't automatically mean it would work for cola, especially a category with such strong established associations.
Exactly. And that links directly to the second key lesson. The critical need to align your product positioning with actual consumer behavior and expectations. Crystal Pepsi's clear look created certain assumptions, maybe about a lighter taste or more refreshment.
Yeah, maybe like seltzer or something.
Perhaps. But the actual product didn't quite fulfill those assumptions. Businesses have to make sure that every part of their product, the visuals, the function, the taste, all works together in harmony with what consumers anticipate and desire.
It's like the product made a visual promise that the flavor couldn't quite keep. It looked new and different, but tasted, well, too familiar in some ways and not familiar enough in others. Very confusing.
Hmm. And finally, the Crystal Pepsi saga really underscores how vital it is to be aware of your competitive landscape and anticipate how rivals might react. Coca-Cola's quick, strategic launch of Tab Clear showed just how fast a competitor can move to disrupt a newcomer's momentum.
Yeah, you can't operate in a vacuum.
Absolutely not. Businesses need to be ready for those competitive responses and have strategies ready to counter them effectively.
So what might seem like just a quirky story about a see-through soda actually holds some pretty deep insights, doesn't it? Into innovation, understanding consumers, and just the tough realities of bringing any new product to market.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that just being novel isn't enough to guarantee success. You need that deep understanding of your consumers' underlying needs. You need to do your homework with solid market research, and you need to keep an eye on what your competitors might do next.
So a final thought for you listening. Think about other products you remember, maybe seemingly innovative ones that just didn't last. What reasons, perhaps similar to what we've talked about with Crystal Pepsi, might explain why they failed?
Yeah.
What does this tell us about that really tricky balance between introducing something new and exciting and actually meeting those fundamental, maybe even unspoken consumer needs and desires? It's definitely something worth mulling over.
Indeed. Maybe take some time, look up some other case studies of product flops. You might be surprised by the patterns you see and the valuable lessons they offer about, well, business strategy and just how people think.